Have you ever wondered what really happens after a crime is committed? You know, you see it on the news, but the story's often way more complicated. A single wrongful act can kick off not one, not two, but three totally different investigations, and each one plays by its own set of rules. Today, we're going to unravel that whole puzzle.
So, to really get our heads around this, let's start with a scenario. Let's say an employee embezzles $100,000 from their company. Okay, seems pretty straightforward, right? A classic case of theft.
But you might think you just call the cops, but it's not nearly that simple. See, this one act starts a whole cascade of consequences, creating three distinct battlegrounds. And if you're an investigator, you've got to know immediately which lane you're driving in. All right, so the very first domino to fall, it almost always happens inside the company's own walls. This is the company's own fight, the internal, or what we call the administrative investigation. The company's main goal here isn't to send someone to jail. Nope, it's all about enforcing its own rules, the code of conduct, company policies. The biggest consequence here is usually an administrative action, like getting fired. Now, this is where things get really interesting. In a criminal case, we all know the famous line, "You have the right to remain silent." We've heard it a million times on TV. But what about when it's your boss or someone from HR asking the questions about that missing 100 grand? This is such a crucial distinction. In the corporate world, forget about a Miranda warning. You get something called an Upjohn Warning. And here's the twist. It's designed to protect the company, not you. Yeah, the rules of this game are completely different. The investigator literally has to tell the employee three things. First, I work for the company, not for you. Second, anything you say is confidential, but that confidentiality belongs to the company. And third, the company can turn around and share everything you just told me with the police. It makes it crystal clear whose side they're on. Okay, so let's jump to the next battlefront, the civil investigation. The employee might be fired, sure, but the company is still out $100,000. This is all about how they try to get that money back. So the company, which is now called the plaintiff, turns around and sues the ex-employee, who's now the defendant. See, the goal here isn't punishment. It's what they call a remedy. They just want to be made whole again. They want their money back. But how does the company actually prove its case? This brings us to probably the single most important difference between all these investigations, the concept of burden of proof. It really all comes down to one question. How much proof do you actually need to win? And you can see here the level of certainty you need changes dramatically. For those civil and internal administrative cases, the bar is surprisingly low. You really only need to be just over 50% sure. But for a criminal case, whoa, the standard is incredibly high. You're talking almost 100% certainty. So here's the key point. In that lawsuit to get its money back, the company only needs to prove that it's more likely than not that the employee took the money. Just think 51%. If you imagine a scale, they just need it to tip, even slightly in their favor. That's it, they win. And now we get to the one we're all most familiar with, thanks to 1,000 TV dramas, the criminal case. This is when you start hearing the sirens. This is where the government, the state, steps in. Why? Because the act isn't just a private fight between the company and an employee anymore. It's seen as an offense against society as a whole. And in this arena, the goal is punishment, plain and simple. Jail time, big fines. So here, the standard of proof is the absolute highest in the legal world, beyond a reasonable doubt. This means the prosecution's evidence has to be so rock solid, so convincing, that there is no other logical explanation for what happened. That 51% certainty from the civil case, it wouldn't even get you in the door here, not even close. Okay, so with all three of these investigations possibly happening at the exact same time, you can see how things could get a little confusing. So let's just pull back for a second and create a simple little cheat sheet to see how they stack up side by side.
When you really boil it all down, the biggest differences come down to two things. First, who's actually in the fight? Is it the government versus you, or is it your boss? And second, what's really at stake? Is your freedom on the line, or just your job?
In this table, just puts it all together perfectly. You can see how the rules completely change depending on which lane you're in. The players, the level of proof, your rights, the final outcome, they're all different. For example, in that internal investigation, you actually have a duty to cooperate. But in a criminal case, you have the right to remain silent. It's like playing a totally different sport. So why does any of this matter to you when you're just, reading a news headline or trying to follow some high-profile case?
Because a single incident, like our $100,000 embezzlement, doesn't just create one case, it creates multiple, simultaneous proceedings, all running in parallel, each with its own rulebook. So the company investigates and fires the employee, the district attorney prosecutes them for a felony, and the company sues them to get the money back, all happening at the very same time.
So here's the big takeaway. When you hear about something like this, ask yourself, is the person being fired, sued, or arrested? Knowing which lane the investigation is in tells you everything you need to know about the rules of the game, the level of proof needed, and what's truly at stake. It's never just one story. The real question is, which battle are you watching?